Hello dear friends, welcome to my channel, and in today's video I'm going to demonstrate to you portrait drawing using unusual color combinations. As for this portrait, I was trying to experiment and I used yellow and purple to create a portrait. This piece was part of my painting challenge that I had earlier this year, where I had to draw portrait every single day or every second day because some portraits were taking a little longer time. So I decided to share with you some of the process. As an artist, I believe we have to push our boundaries and try some different techniques and color combinations. I started first to work on the left side of the face, which will be the lightest part, and I'm using mainly yellow color. And as you might notice, I started with the lightest colors, with the lighter yellow, and then gradually adding a little bit darker shades using yellow and ochre. I'm keeping my palette on the visible spot on the right side of the screen so you could see these colors when I'm mixing and which actually colors I'm using. While the yellow part of the forehead is still wet, I started to add a little bit of darker and lighter purple shades on the right side of forehead in the purpose mainly to blend these two colors together. That might be a little bit tricky when you mix purple and yellow close to each other. So I'm trying to use a clean brush to smooth borders between two colors. And you could actually see in the process that I'm cleaning my brush and with slightly wet brush making the border between color and the next color or the part close to it just a little bit wet, so then I could use my, I would say, favorite technique using gradients. If you would like to learn more about specific gradient techniques using wet surface and dry surface, I have already created a special video for that, and I will include it into description under the video below, and also you could see it now in the right upper corner, so you feel free to watch that video, and I explain there in details how to work with gradients and create smooth gradations between colors. And now let's return to the portrait I'm working at this moment. You might notice that I already covered the bigger part of the right side of the face with light purple color. I left also some small surfaces on the face which I want to keep white, so I didn't cover them in the purpose, and I just made a little bit smoother edge of the color, blending it with the white surface. I'm washing out some amount of light purple paint while it's still wet, and it's much easier to do while paint is a little bit wet, and I'm just cleaning my brush and using slightly wet brush to remove some amount of paint. Working with two totally different colors for the face as yellow and purple, I'm still trying to focus on tonal solution for the face, and you might notice that both sides of the face, yellow and purple, are tonally equal. Then I'm starting to add gradually a little bit darker shades. This portrait was part of the drawing challenge, so I also wanted to experiment a little bit with materials, and I truly love to use watercolor pencils for sketching, and I decided to add a little bit of details with watercolor pencils. I like how soft they are and they have pretty palette. I did some outlines using purple, blue, and pink, and it also helped me to see a little bit more structure on that part of the watercolor that I already covered. I know that if you feel good in some specific technique or using materials that you feel comfortable, it's always hard to push yourself to try something new, but this is something that I truly recommend to do for all of you, to experiment a little bit with materials, even if you're not gonna change, let's say, your favorite watercolor to using watercolor pencils. It's still a great way to explore some new effects, techniques, and materials. Meanwhile, I'm adding some shades on the forehead on the dry surface. So that's why you might notice that I use clean, slightly wet brush to smooth borders on the shade for the forehead and on the hair. I'm adding gradual shades around the eye, a little bit on the hair and around the nose to separate specifically the tip of the nose from the same light skin tone. As well, I add very transparent shade on the chin, and now moving to the next level of shades, making it slightly darker. Again, I prefer to work kind of step by step, gradually adding tone on a face. I think it's always helpful because you start with the lightest tones and then adding more depth. I personally believe that it's much safer to work with kind of layering even on a wet surface or on a dry surface, so you could control more darkness of the shades, and it's easy to make sure that you're not going too dark, especially if you're newer to watercolor or wet techniques, or if you're experimenting and trying something new. You can notice now how I'm building the main shade around the eye on the darker side, on the purple side, which will be darker. And I'm going to add even more darker tones around the eye area, on the eyelids and the iris. While the surface is still wet, it's easier for me to manipulate with paint, smoothing the edges, making them not that well visible, making them softer, and adding even darker, more intense, less liquid paint, because that paint will not spread so much and I will be able to control darker tones in a better way. In this challenge, my aim was to experiment with color, as I'm blending two complementary colors which are on totally opposite side of the color wheel, and I wanted to make sure that I can make it bright and juicy, and in the same moment that while I will be blending one side and other side, I will not create some weird colors in between, and then the two parts of the face will look like it's still the same face. It's one portrait, not two parts from different faces, that they're connected between each other. I don't know, guys, if you ever took in your life any drawing challenges to boost your creativity and just enjoy drawing a lot during a very short amount of time. I organized it twice with some of my followers on Instagram, and both times it was so valuable experience for myself personally as an artist, and I was very happy to see artworks of my followers, some my old students who took part in the 2 weeks painting drawing challenges, drawing basically every day. So you push yourself to create really big amount of artwork in a very short period of time, and I think it's really cool because you can push your limits, and it might feel exhausting sometimes because you're trying to kind of keep it up, finishing artwork every single day. Sometimes it took me 2 days to finish some pieces that were more detailed or bigger size, But still, in the end, after I actually had it like for 15 days and once in 17 days, it was really cool then to see the whole progress and some new ideas, new experiments, new colors that I used in my artworks. And this is one of my really favorite parts of this portrait when I worked on the hair. And I want to give a couple of comments. Here you mainly use your ability to create gradients. I started working with very intense color, as you noticed, and the surface was dry. So then to help this paint to spread smoothly and don't create any very visible borders between darker and lighter colors, I used clean and slightly wet brush to make surface a little bit wet, but just a little bit enough that the paint is not spreading a lot, so you can control it a little bit better and making edges very smooth. And then actually the hair surface will be wet enough, so you can manipulate with brighter colors, creating visible brush strokes, any intensity that you want, and they still will be a little bit smooth. Even if you will go for very dark, intense color, because the surface is still slightly wet, colors will blend and will create hair-alike texture. I didn't want to keep a lot of yellowish color on the hair, and I wanted to add also more contrast to the artwork, so I added more darker tones, darker brush strokes to cover some part of the hair on the left side, and manipulate it a little bit with the brush, adding lighter tones, creating smoother gradations on the hair. Also, you might notice that I often change brushes for smaller or bigger size. Depends on the detailization I'm working on. I like to use very sharply tipped brush, and sometimes covering bigger surface is much easier to use bigger brush. You actually can find some brush that will contain both qualities, bigger surface with a very sharp tip. But I personally like sometimes changing brushes also, because if you work with different colors and tones and you need quickly change color for the opposite color or opposite tone, so you don't need to worry about cleaning brushes really well, especially if you work on a wet surface and you don't want to spend much time while the paper is still wet. So in this case, I like to use different brushes, so then I'm using them for kind of similar colors or like darker tones, or another brush for lighter tones. Completing detailization on the hair, making me think that I just want to add a little more sharper details overall on the whole portrait, to make some shades a little darker, or just to add a little more smaller details that I personally like to add, as I prefer to look at the artwork and spend time looking at the tiny details and think how they all been created, to keep in your attention for a longer time looking. I used watercolor pencils in the middle part of my process, adding a little bit shades and some details. And now I'm coming back to review the whole face, where I want to add details again using watercolor pencils and add a little extra brighter colors, outlines, because it was my aim for this drawing challenge to experiment with vibrant colors. I hope this video gave you some encouragement and ideas of how to experiment or try something new with materials that you regularly use. And if so, Please don't forget to give a thumb up for this video. It will encourage me a lot to create new artful content for you. Or at least I hope you enjoyed that relaxing mode of this video. And thanks for staying with me till the end of this painting. And I'm wishing you an artful day. Stay in touch.